tucheze sasa.
Jumbo Jumbo! How are you doing this evening? Unaendeleaje? I am doing fine and I hope you're having an amazing evening as well. My name is Diana and I'll be the host of this live stream. And I believe that you'll stay with me from the start till the end, where we are going to learn about amazing things together. Now, I want us to think about this. Think about your childhood. Can you remember a story your grandmother or your teacher told you years ago? Can you? Chances are that you can still remember it, right? But you probably can't remember the vocabulary list that you studied in school. Why is that? Why do you think that happens? Now, today we are going to explore why our brains remember stories so much better than just isolated words, and how storytelling can transform the way your child learns Swahili. Isn't that really amazing? Now, tell me where you are watching us from. Are you learning Swahili? Are you also learning Swahili? And what is really helping your child or you learn Swahili better? And then the last question is, what is your favorite childhood story? Please type on the comment section and answer me all those questions if you think that they resonate with you. So today we are going to explore, the secrets of learning. And this is just using stories. And we have seen that our brains actually, remember stories much better than just isolated words, you know. And we are going to look at that and see how so, you know. Why do stories work so well? No? Stories create meaning. When you memorize something, let's look at this example. We have mbwa, which is a dog, paka, which is a cat, and nyumba, which is a house. Actually, you know what? Your brain has already disconnected. Yani has disconnected words. But in a story, now listen to this. Mbwa alikimbia kwenda nyumbani. Now the brain connects. We have dog, running, home, and then action. Are you seeing how that works? Now, let us go back again and look at this. Mbwa, which means dog. Paka, which means cat. Nyumba, which means a house. When you read those vocabularies, your brain has, disconnected words. That is true. But in a story, when you hear mbwa alikimbia kwenda nyumbani, and now the brain connects. An amazing joke that our brain can do. It connects mbwa, running, home, action, and then you also have emotions. Now you see, language becomes very meaningful. Mhm. Now, let's see another thing. Our brain actually, they naturally organize information into narratives. That's why the stories help us remember because they combine. What are they really combining? They combine emotions, sequence, characters, images, repetition all together. Mhm. So, as we have said, it is that our brain naturally organize information into narratives. And that's why we see that stories are helping us remember because these they combine, emotions, they combine sequences, they combine characters, and they also combine images and then lastly repetition. And through that we are able to learn a language. I have a question for you, for my viewers. What story do you remember from your childhood? Please remember to type it on the comment section and I will read it out loud so that we can share together. Do you remember any of the stories? I think, do I remember? Yeah, I do remember. Oh, what was the name? I don't know whether those who are watching me can remember. There was that story of, you know, I think the main character was looking for the pen, for the pencil, sorry, and eventually they found the pencil that was, left on their ear. Which story was that? But I can definitely remember that story that we learned back in school. So we have seen that they are actually helping us combine emotion, sequence, characters, as well as emotions and a repetition that is there. Now, you know, stories they build vocabulary naturally. Did you know that? Yeah, stories they build vocabularies naturally. Yeah, instead of teaching apple, bananas, orange, teach about teach a story about a monkey looking for a fruit, and these kids would naturally understand these vocabularies. No, a child remembers because those words actually have context. Mhm. Do you know that the words actually have context? Look at this. Vocabulary learned in context is easier recalled than just word list. That is true. Vocabulary that is actually learned in context is easier for someone to recall, for children to recall, because they have context in it than just isolated word list. Do you agree with me, those who are my viewers today? Now, do you know do you know that children they don't ask what the meaning of the word is. No, what they do, they understand from the story. You see, so if you have a story, if you decided to say a monkey that is looking for fruits, and you have a story about that, these children are not going to ask you the meaning of some vocabularies. No, they are going to understand through the story exactly how they learned their first language. That is how it is going to happen. Let us look at interactive, storytelling. Have you ever, um, have you ever been in a session where you are having interactive story time? What happened? How did you leave that place? Did you leave that place understanding all the vocabularies that were used because it was a story and it was interactive, and these vocabularies were actually used in context? Now, storytelling should never be one way. Make children to be part of the story. And how do you do that? You involve them in the storytelling. You actually need to pause and ask, what do you think is going to happen next? What did Jabari do? What did Imani do? You say we are making it interactive so that they can remember these vocabularies. Make the children to be part of the storytelling session. Again, you may ask a question. What color was the bird? Was it blue? Was it red? Was it yellow? Just involving them in the story. And then, can you hear the lion roar? Or can you actually roar like a lion? When you ask them all that, they are going to be hooked and they are going to listen attentively. And you are making them to be active in this storytelling session. And in this session, use actions, use facial expressions, use different voices. Let's say, for example, you see that we have Imani saying that mama ninataka maji. Do not say it casually. No, mimic how a child will talk. Mama ninataka maji. Uh-huh. That's what we say. Use different voices so that it can be very, interactive to listen to. And also use the sound effects. For example, if you're saying how Jabari fell, nasema Jabari alianguka mchangani. Poof! Those sound effects makes the learning session or the storytelling session to be very, very interactive. And then you can ask question to the kids again. Jabari alianguka vipi? And they'll be eager to say, alianguka poo. You see, you are now involving them. And through that, language becomes, unforgettable. And I know this is the wish of most educators, the wish of most, parents, bilingual parents who are making sure that they are teaching their kids their language. Make sure that you are choosing the right story. As much as yes, we know that using stories makes them to understand these vocabularies faster. Remember also, not just a story. Choose the right story because the right story is going to also make them hooked and they'll remember these words easily. But there's a common mistake that parents make. And you know which mistake they make? They choose books that are too difficult. Instead of doing that, please choose stories with simple sentences, not complex sentences. Simple sentences. There's a lot of repetition there. There are also interactive pictures there. If you have been attending my other live stream, you'd see that my stories have good pictures, simple sentences, you know, and make sure that they have a predictable patterns. Why do I say that? So that when you are using circling, they can easily predict what is going to happen next. And then also let it have funny moments in it. I remember there is a story that I think I used last week. It was Imani Indiani, and we saw there's a section where Imani used, what was that? The coconut. Yes, used the how do I put it? She had a coconut that is cut, and then she just used it on her head and saying that she's wearing a crown, and then she said she's the queen of the kingdom of Nazi, which was very entertaining. She was walking majestically and saying, I'm the queen of the Nazi kingdom." You see, have those also the funny moments in it. And good stories, they usually, repeat words. They can have words like, you know, twende, safari, aliona. This repeated exposure, it actually strengthens memory. Keep on repeating over and over again so that the memories of these kids can, you keep on strengthening them as you go. It is actually very, very important. Okay? So, we are going to look at now building comprehension. Do you know reading is not it's isn't just enough? What you need to do after the story, ask questions. And what questions are you going to ask? You're going to ask the who, what, where, and why. So we have what happened first? What happened first with Imani? Or what happened first in Jabari? Where did Imani go first? Where did Jabari go first? How did Imani get lost? You see? Why is Imani crying? Mm. Now, children actually usually learn, through listening, speaking, thinking, you know, and they also learn through vocabularies as well, all at once. Did you know that? But remember to build this comprehension. And the comprehension, you're going to build it through asking this simple, simple question: the who, what, where, and why. Because now you are going to measure and see, okay, did they really understand the story? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on together. Let us bring, stories into everyday life. But most of the parents usually think that they need to have dozens of books so that their children can actually speak first, you know. But this is not true. You don't need all that. You can actually create these stories on your own, Create these stories about breakfast, going to school, going for shopping together with your daughter or your son, cooking, we also have bath time, and then you can talk about a lost shoe, a naughty cat, uh-huh, the family dog. Children usually love stories about themselves, not any other person, just about themselves. That's why we say that bring these stories into everyday's life. Don't have these dozens of books. No, create these stories about your daily life. you know your breakfast time, going to school, shopping, cooking together, lost shoes, naughty cats, your family, because most of these children will get hooked if this is a story that is actually involving them. Yeah, it will make a big difference than using other, you know, other books, other storybooks. So try that and see what happens. Or if you are in my life today and you have tried that, how was it? Did it become any better? Did your child or son start, speaking or uttering some few words? Tell me on the comment section what happened so that we can all discuss this together and see that indeed it works. Also, try to have, live demonstrations. But in those demonstrations, please keep it simple, use repetitions, ask questions, show them how interactive storytelling works. Okay? You can actually, that's what we were saying, that have live demonstration, you know, and make sure that you are keeping really simple, use repetition, and, you know, it will definitely work for them. Now, I have a question for us. Have you ever used stories in teaching your son or daughter? How did it work? Do you think it was much better than having the list of, and dozens of vocabulary list on your fridge? Did, learning vocabularies in context help them understand better? You can type your answer in the comment section and we see how we are moving with this. But we have, myth that most of the parents usually believe in. They believe that a child can actually learn from vocabulary list. Mm-mm. Most of these children, they actually learn through meaningful conversations. We all learn through meaningful conversation rather than just having a vocabulary, a vocabulary list with us. So not only the list that can help us, but meaningful conversation, they go a long way. Others think that their kids need to have very expensive books so that they can actually start speaking a language. But that is not true. We say that you can actually create stories from your everyday life because they like being involved. If you talk about them, they become hooked. Another one is where now you feel like stories are only for children. No, stories are not only for children. Adults also can actually learn better through stories because they provide meaningful context. Did you know that? I know most of us will think that these stories would only help children, but they can also help adults because they have or they provide meaningful context to them. Another myth that we have here is that we all know that, not all of us, but we feel like reading once is enough. No. As we've always been saying this, I think we've talked about this, in fact, in every of our live stream where we say that being consistent is the best way to go. Now, repeated storytelling would actually help strengthen vocabulary. It will strengthen vocabulary, it will strengthen um, comprehension, and it will also strengthen confidence. Did you know that? Remember, it needs to be repeated so that it can actually strengthen the vocabularies that they're learning. It also help in comprehension and it will also help them in building the confidence that they need in order to speak this language without having to feel like somebody's gonna laugh at them. Now, I have questions for you, those who are watching me. Do you read stories for your children? Do you really read stories for your children? What is your child's favorite book and that they like the most? What is that they like the most? Or do you actually make up stories at home, making sure that those stories are actually about their daily lives? Or would you actually like more Swahili books? Because in Tayari we got you covered. And then, what kind of books do your children like? Do they like, or do they, what kind of these stories do they enjoy? Do they enjoy, animals, adventure, family, or fairy tales? Which ones do they like? You can type your answer in the comment section so that we keep on interacting in this live stream. So the first question was, do you read stories for your children? What is your child's favorite book? Do you make up stories at home? Would you like to have more Swahili books at home? What kind of stories do your child or your children enjoy the most? Are these, animal stories, adventures, family, or fairy tales? Which one do they love the most? You can answer those questions in the comment section as we keep this session very, very interactive. But I want us to look at something very, very important. Some people may be watching this and feel like, oh, this is made up. No, we have proven research, for people who have studied how language can actually be acquired. And we have, one of these people. Uh, this person has said that stories provide meaningful context. That is true. And he has said that words learned in context are generally remembered better than isolated vocabularies because learners connect with the situation and ideas. That is very true. This research was done by Stephen Carson, where he talked about input hypotheses and the power of reading. So through that, he say that we learn, words learned in context are actually very, very are remembered better than isolated vocabularies. Another person who has done research on this, we have, where they say that reading aloud. Oh, let me use this. Reading loud improves, language development. They say that shared reading helps children develop vocabularies, listening skills, comprehension, and actually early literacy. Mhm. This research was done by the American Academy of Pediatrics, who recommends that you should, let us train these kids to read loud, from infancy to support language and brain development. So, encourage them to read loud because it's going to help them in, language development, and it will also, it will support language and also help in brain development. Uh-huh. So we have another one where they say that interactive storytelling strengthens learning. That is true. So when children actually, when children answer question, predict events, act out parts in a story, they process language more deeply rather than just sitting there and listening to the story without doing anything. This research was done by Harvard, where they say that children actually, a child emphasizes mostly, in responsive, where we have back and forth interaction, which has in turn and supports language as well as the brain development. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So another one, we have another proven research that has been done is that repeated reading builds vocabularies. That is true. Hearing the same story multiple times helps children notice new words, sentences, patterns, as well as the meaning. So, if we keep on repeating, as we said, how we learn a language, we keep on doing the repetition, it becomes very easy for children to learn and build up their vocabularies, as well as it also will help in brain development. Now we are almost going to the end of our live stream today. And you know, this evidence that we have read or the research that has been done here has really helped a lot of parents who are who are raising bilingual kids. The other day we were talking of how we can raise, our bilingual children, and we were able to see some of the things that can literally help. And today we are having proven research that has really shown what happens when these stories are read to our kids. So I'd like to close this live stream by encouraging us to help our children learn languages through incorporating stories in our learning. You can buy storybooks, but the one that will help you the most and where the children love the most is through having or building these stories yourselves at home, and you know involving them in that story, involving them in that storytelling. So children actually may forget the worksheet you gave them, but they'll often remember the story you told them. Do you believe that? You know what? Stories don't just teach words. No, they don't just teach words. They teach meaning. They actually build, imagination in our minds, in our children's mind. They also build confidence in our children, as well as connection. So, if we want our children to love Swahili, we shouldn't only teach them the language. We should actually even invite them into stories that they will want to hear over and over again. Because it is through these stories that they learn these vocabularies, because we have said that mostly they learn through context. Vocabularies only won't help. They learn that vocabularies through a story, which is very, very important. So in Tayari, we have embraced this storytelling because we know because we have seen we have read about research, and we have seen how they really help in understanding of vocabularies in children. So in Tayari, we incorporate our day-to-day learning using stories. And through this, we have seen children understanding these vocabularies and having the confidence to speak as soon as they understand that language. So remember to include them in the storytelling. Remember also to build comprehension. And we said, how do you build comprehension? You build them through asking the questions at the end of the storytelling session. Ask who, what, where, and why. And through that, you'll get to know whether they did understand or not. I'll see you in my next stream, where we are also going to talk of other important ways of learning a language, or how to improve, you know, in teaching or learning a language. Until next time, bye, Harry.